Welcome to Bible Over Brews, deep thoughts fermented over time and text. I'm back, Aaron, Crew, Juice, Bavert, as well as Gumby and Steve. But tonight, we've also got Mike
Donahue,
and we've got Kelvin.
Kelvin Woodford.
This is a special night.
So we've got a good audience tonight. Tonight, we'll be sampling Fatheads. We are starting with Bumbleberry. It is a honey blueberry ale. So everybody, pour away. Mike, what have you been up to?
oh man, trying to just stay afloat, working hard, doing a lot of website development. We were down a couple staff members at the office, so kind of stockpiling, catching back up there. But everything's going well. My daughter's turning 15 tomorrow.
Ooh, getting dangerously close to Sweet 16.
That's true.
And your other daughter just got a car, right?
She did, and she's gonna be 18 this year, so we got a couple. Yeah.
How's that
right.
insurance looking?
It's never looking good.
Kelvin, how have you been?
Pretty good, pretty good. Just working and trying to keep the fort down, and another grandbaby on the way.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah,
It's great news.
my youngest daughter and her family. This will be their second. Then my oldest daughter and her family. They have two.
That's
Awesome.
a good number to stop.
Yeah, I'm loading up.
Just stop it.
I think they will be. Yeah, I think they will be stopping.
It's coming from a guy with five. But,
Five grands? Or,
five kids.
these would be 4 grands.
Okay.
This is pretty good.
The only downside to that is all my kids live out of town, so
Yeah.
got to go see them.
Yeah, it's got a nice honey looking look to it.
Yeah, right off the-
Definitely taste the blueberry in it.
oh man, right off the bat, it has a very fruity aroma.
Yeah.
Smooth too.
Yeah.
Doesn't hit you. Real smooth.
I think that's that honey. I love any beer with honey in it. It's just awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of got a red hue. I was surprised to see that.
I wonder if that's the
light.
hops.
Well, they use local products, so locally grown. So I'm sure they got a beekeeper where they got local honey from.
Well, you know what they say, that honey locally grown does help to retard allergies and stuff like that, and allergens. And what better way to take it in than through a beer?
Absolutely.
I got a race coming up Saturday, so I'm carb loading now. This is perfect.
All right.
And what's the race?
A 5K for fundraising for the Constellation Schools.
Okay.
Oh, awesome. Oh man, that is good.
Yeah, Fatheads, they don't mess around, man.
Well, we're no strangers to it.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean the three of us have spent 1 or 2 nights there, and the food.
Spent the night there?
Well,
Almost.
dinner.
We would have ate more.
They do close. Which one were you at? The one in Lorraine or the one in Sheldon Road?
North
Lorraine.
Olmsted. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean everything was good there. I mean even the food's phenomenal. I couldn't finish my plate.
No, their
Actually, they're
portions
building a
are
huge
so
one in
sinful.
Middleburg.
Oh,
They're huge.
On Engel Road. There's a big, huge one they're building now.
oh really?
Hmm.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
I can lie, this fathead guy looks like my dad.
It's
Just a little bit like him.
Man, this is incredibly smooth,
very smooth.
and I like the aroma.
The more you drink
It's-
it, the more the fruity flavor comes out.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it does. It does.
That is awesome.
5.3%. They could kick it up 1 or 2.
I think they can.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed. So tonight we'll be going over how do you define the faith, the Christian faith? And the answer to that is the great councils. Without the councils, we wouldn't have a Christianity that we know of as we do today. So, jumping all the way back, the first council, believe it or not, was actually in the book of Acts, Acts 15. And there was a big dispute back and forth between the Judeans and the Gentiles coming in, and the Gentiles as they came in, were trying to be led into the position where they were being told that they had to adopt all of the Mosaic law, they had to get circumcised, etc., etc., etc. And what they don't tell you is that during this time in the ancient Mesopotamian area, Judaism was actually a very evangelical, faith. They just like kind of now the way that the Christian evangelicals are. That's actually a lot how they were back then. There was street preachers out there talking, trying to get people involved, get them into the synagogues. The trouble with that though is that it's kind of like a two-step thing. So there were those who were born Jewish, and then there's the rest. So as you came in, you might be a proselyte, right? You might be able to come in and join everybody, but you weren't really Jewish. So there was, but they still want you to follow all of the Mosaic laws.
Aaron, what's that also that if you were a non-Jewish person, you also were restricted into the temple where you could go, in a sense that there were certain areas of the temple where only if you were Jewish you could be there?
Well, I mean, there's certain parts of the temple that is completely off limits, except for to the high priest,
Right.
even then once a year.
Yeah.
And the areas you could be in can kind of vary a little bit depending upon where you were. Not every synagogue is the same. They actually had denominations back then. I mean, you had, of course, the Pharisees, and of course you had the Sadducees, but you also had Hebraists, you had Essenes, so there was actually several large groups, and they didn't agree. Kind of like the way the evangelicals don't now.
Wait a minute. That
Bad-
happens. That really happens?
I've been told. So,
Well, the sad you see, they were sad.
and
We're taking your beer away, Steve.
So for the most part, do you feel only time changes?
right? Well, it kind of goes with the whole Semitic prophecy thing because, here in the West, everybody's, here's this prophecy. Now we're waiting for this to take place, That's not Semitic prophecy. In the books it was actually written in across the Old Testament into the New Testament, prophecies actually repeat. They happen again. They're redundant. And that's actually, patterns. The Semitic culture believes in patterns inside of prophecy. And that's why you see certain prophecies resurface in the New Testament. For example, he shall be born of a virgin. That passage that takes place isn't talking about the Messiah. In fact, the Jews never looked at that as a messianic prophecy. That actually takes place and is fulfilled in the Old Testament. If you actually go back and look at it in context, it takes place and is fulfilled within one lifetime. So that was a sign to one specific king. But that's reused again in the New Testament. So inside the Semitic mind frame, it repeats. It's a pattern. It's even going into the church. Look at the church. There's persecution that's talked about, but then it happens again later, then it happens again later. So
And it's happening today.
yeah, so patterns repeat. And in the Semitic idea of prophecy, that's what prophecy is. It isn't simply, well, they said this is going to happen, and look over here, it's going to happen. Just wait. Inside the Semitic mind frame, it's a pattern. So our idea in the West of prophecy is not the way the Bible was actually written. So it sheds a whole new light on all that.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
But what's just to backtrack a little bit, you said the prophecy of he will be born a virgin. Where is that confirmed? Why? I think I remember talking about it in the past, but I can't remember where in the Bible or how to support that.
Oh, that's okay. We're doing a future episode on
All right.
that, so we will be covering that. But that dovetails into a lot, and
All right.
so we'll be spending a whole episode on that.
Got it.
As far as the councils go, The first council was called because of the Judaizers. And the Judaizers specifically came forward to tell everybody, hey, you have to obey the Mosaic law because Moses said so. And so that's why the apostles had to show up. That's why Peter had to take his stance. And that's why ultimately they go through and they submit a letter saying, listen, just, don't mess around sexually, don't drink blood, don't eat meat strangled, and stay away from that food that's offered to idols. Now, what they don't tell you in the background, because this is a letter written contemporaneously with the people at the time, so he doesn't have to explain why he says that. So, first off, if you go back to the Old Testament, these are actually covered by people who are not Jewish who want to come into the Mosaic laws. So that actually is inside the Old Testament. And so what Peter is saying is, obey these laws. Don't worry about the rest of them.
Yeah.
Okay. But the reason why he's saying that is because of where they are. Because where they are, they would have sacrifices in the pagan temples.
Okay.
And in the pagan temples, you also had pagan prostitutes. So, and you would literally have relations with the prostitutes to honor, gods of fertility and stuff like that. And then on top of that, they would sacrifice on the altars and they would cut open the arteries on animals, and you would put your head down, you would drink the living blood out of the animal as it was dying, because that's the living blood. So that's all part of the pagan practices that he's referencing here without explaining it. That's why he's saying stay away from this stuff.
Which I don't remember on the Ten Commandments. I mean, I don't remember that. But that,
question.
a lot of that stuff came from, the Talmud.
Yeah, it's true.
And so there is what they call the law of Moses, and then they also the oral law that they used to follow, which was, i.e., the secret law, which is, the Pharisaical interpretations of all these different laws.
Yeah.
Essentially their opinions and how they want you to run their life down to the minutia details of everything.
Yeah.
But even in the Old Testament, many of the laws that were because of the pagan customs of the non-Jews.
Yeah.
And-
I'm gonna hit it on this one a little bit, because the Torah. Have you ever sat down and actually read the law of Hammurabi?
No.
Okay. The laws of Hammurabi are also ancient Semitic laws, contemporaneous with the Torah. And if you look at them, a lot of them are like spot on. A lot of the Torah is actually based around the laws of Hammurabi. Now, some people would look at that and they would say, well, see, the whole Torah is a farce. No, not necessarily. Even if you get into the New Testament, what does Paul say? Obey the laws of the land, right? Because if you obey the laws of the land, you will show that you are my followers. So Paul explains that thoroughly across Galatians and Romans, and he thoroughly explains that. Well, he's not changing anything. That's what they did in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, a lot of the Torah is based around Hammurabi. There are differences, though, and the differences are where you honor the Lord. And there are far more parts to honoring your Creator inside the Torah than there are inside the laws of Hammurabi. So the laws of Hammurabi are predominantly centered around your civil life. But there's a lot of the laws that are almost identical.
But in one sense, though, even if you go to the law, the Mosaic law, and even you go into Christianity as well, but it's based on the two greatest, things that Jesus talked about: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And the other is to love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
So that everything hinges around that. So that because Yahweh, who we worship and who wants our undivided 100% attention, and not to the others, to these other customs or things in honoring to other gods that do exist, However, but he is the Lord of Lords, the God of all gods. And so what happens is that these other things are distractions that take you away from that honoring God, who he is.
I would agree.
And that's one of the things I think is just really what everything really hinges around. And then when we start putting extra stuff in there, which causes controversy, causes councils, where we start saying, well, it's all based on this, but really it all hinges around those two basic things. Love the Lord God, all your mind, heart, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself.
I agree, because if you look at the Ten Commandments and really all of the old Torah law, if you look at it, it all distills down to those two. Like Jesus said, if you follow these two, you got it. You're good. In fact, if you go back to Matthew 25, the sheep and the goats, what does it all distill down to? Love God, love your neighbor. That's really that's everything right there. And that's where people get really, really hung up on things, like your Judaizers. And in your modern day, that's your Hebrew Roots movement. Your Hebrew Roots movement is saying the same thing. Oh, you have to follow Mosaic law, Mosaic law, Mosaic law. Well, you just totally missed the whole purpose of Jesus coming, because Jesus tried to raise the bar. He said, if I'm going to make this a law about getting into your heart, tell you what, instead of not sleeping with your neighbor's wife, don't lust over your neighbor's, daughter. Don't lust over the girl at the grocery store. Let's take it a little deeper. In fact, instead of not killing your neighbor, love them. Love your enemy. In fact, give your enemy your coat. Take care of your enemy. So it really comes down to those two laws and everything you do. And Jesus really tried to raise the bar. And in the New Testament, then going into the church after that, was called theosis. Raising the bar and taking it to that next level, being like Christ.
I think he tried to, and that's what made him unpopular and ultimately, crucified, really, because it was going against the oral traditions of the top Pharisees at the time, where they didn't just follow the Ten Commandments. They had all these extra non-biblical traditions that they created and wanted followed, and he called them out on it, because they would claim that their birthright was all the way back to the line of Abraham, and they used that against people, So, like you said earlier, I mean, you can convert to Judaism, but you're not going to really be a stockholder. You're not going to get any shares of the company.
Yeah.
You're just going to be an employee, but you're not going to ever be a full owner.
That's concisely put.
Yeah, and that's what he was trying to say. No. You're making it about that, but it's not really about that, and we need to move beyond that. And I still think that's a fight we fight today.
I was gonna say that,
you're saying that my skirt doesn't have to be at a certain level, or I don't have to have a certain kind of haircut, or none of this stuff?
Yeah.
So he's saying you don't smoke, don't chew, don't go with the girls who do.
Well, and those specifically, those Pharisees were claiming that it was literally because of who they were as a race that was above everyone else.
So wait, legalism won't save me?
I think it's the point of sacrifice when you lay out the rules and regs. There's always some who consider themselves the elitists and want to exclude.
That's because you're not part of the club.
There
Right,
you go. Yeah.
Didn't pay my dues.
Even when you do.
No, that actually takes us into another one that has happened during the New Testament times. This is actually before the disciples of the apostles even took over, while the apostles were still in effect. That was Docetism. And Docetism was an early church heresy. And that's one that it got a little bit weird. It's actually a little hard to explain, but it goes into Gnosticism, and they actually have an elevated view of Christ. They're like, Jesus can't be like my 2-year-old because they pick their boogers and stuff. So there's no way that God was really ever one of them.
But how do we know he
Right,
didn't?
okay.
Yeah. No, that's just it though. They're saying that really couldn't be God.
He's so divine that he would never do these things as a human would do.
Yeah,
Right.
The angels
Yeah.
came down and wiped
Yeah.
his nose.
Right.
He just stayed still.
Well,
Never had a dirty diaper in his life.
Right. Right.
well, God can't poop.
Right. It doesn't stink, that's for sure.
Thank God for editing.
No, actually, this is good stuff. I mean, it's just right down to the nitty gritty about, that do we elevate? I mean, he was a man
Yeah, you're right, Steve.
in
That's-
every sense that we are a man. But he did have a divine portion of it as well. That he was God and man. But he, in order to be like us, he had to experience what we experienced.
So he was the only 200% man
Yeah.
because he was 100% man, 100% God.
Absolutely.
I think that scares us as natural men because we realize what our own struggles are, that we constantly face. And like, man, I thought I had that beat. And here I am,
Do it again.
And yeah, so to think that Christ could even be somewhat on that level,
But I
it
think
feels like heresy.
I believe he probably also experienced some of the same temptations that we did.
Oh, absolutely.
That we do. I mean, however, he overcame them and just didn't give in to them in sin. Unfortunately, that's the difference between him and us.
Well, think about it. How else could he redeem mankind but to become man?
Good point, Aaron.
So that's actually the trouble with docetism, because if we say, well, God just appeared like man, but he wasn't man,
So you can always say we can't reach him.
then not only that, but guess what? Guess who's now not redeemed?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Because he was never man. And so that means that to this day, we are still not redeemed.
Right.
So the problem with docetism is that once you start getting into the Gnostic view, once again, we talked about last time, right? Matter bad, spirit good, right? It's really what it boils down to. If I can touch it, it's bad. If I can't touch it, it's good. And that's really the essence of Gnosticism. And once you start getting down to that, you've elevated God to a position where he's no longer, for lack of a better word, helpful.
Yeah, I was going
okay.
to say, if docetism denies the resurrection, Christianity has nothing to stand on then.
Well, yeah, because he just appeared as a man on the cross. He didn't actually die on the cross.
Yeah.
So
He just fell asleep.
well, it's past his bedtime. But yeah, so that was the trouble. In fact, if you go even in the New Testament, they address it. John addresses it inside of his letters. That's why whenever you see anything inside the New Testament that says God appeared as flesh, if you actually read through there's specific references to Jesus being flesh. They did that on purpose. That wasn't accidental. They did it on purpose. They're saying, yeah, guess what? He wasn't what these guys are telling you. He wasn't, appearing as a man. He was man. That's what he did. He was just like you and just like me, but guess what? He didn't fall for our fallacies, and he was able to redeem us. But without that flesh, he's no longer the Redeemer. So that's where you get the docetism, and that's where you get all those references to being in the flesh inside of the New Testament. So it's fairly fascinating. Once you start getting these highlights and you start going back and looking through the New Testament again, it's like, oh man, that's why they said that. I get it. So, and once again, like the previous statement on sacrifices in pagan temples, that's why they laid out those laws specifically. So once you get the background to these things, everything starts making more sense. Oh, all right, I get it. So it's pretty interesting. That brings us up to the next council, the Council of Nicaea. So, if anybody hear anything about that council?
Yes, this is where we got
Heard
our
one or
creed
two
from.
things about it.
This is where the creed came from.
It is.
Where Jesus became God, right?
He beat me to it. Yeah, it's the common misconception is that Jesus was pronounced God at the Council of Nicaea. And before that, he was just a good worker of faith, or if you're a Jehovah's Witness, he was Michael the Archangel enfleshed. But up until that point, he was just simply an enlightened individual, and then he became God at the Council of Nicaea. And that's when they created the Bible. Both huge misconceptions. So, the Council of Nicaea was actually called because of Arius. That's where you get Arianism. He
was questioning the doctrine.
Well, he pretty much he was an ancient form of Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
So, more or less, Jesus wasn't God. Jesus was God's enlightened one, but he wasn't God.
Okay, I got you.
So he was a representative of God.
Right.
He contained good essence from God,
Right.
but he wasn't God. He was the first created among all creation, but he was created. He wasn't God. So, and luckily for us in the New Testament, we do have references to things that say just the opposite. So, but that's the reason it was called, was because of Arius. Arius had a lot of pull. He had a lot of pull. In fact, Constantine, he was really trying to be a good leader, right? Here's this guy trying to pull these guys together. There's all these fights going on. He's like, whoa, stop. Come on, everybody, let's just get along. So he calls this council, and everybody comes together, and he tries to form a good powwow for them, and he's like, listen, let's do some compromise here, right? You compromise a little, so we can all get along. He's a world leader. That's what he does, right? He's a soldier. He's a leader. He's a politician. That's what he does. He creates a little compromise on each side to try to get everybody to get along. The trouble is that's not how councils work. If one gives, they've just given up everything they believe in, and the other one wins. Same goes for the other side. So it came down to those two warring about, well, I should say those two sides warring about what was going to go on. And really, it was a very well put together discussion. So there was nobody, like if you listen to like all these different people, they'll say, well, they argued and Jesus became God by narrow vote, and this happened and that happened, and really none of that happened. It was Arius and just a couple bishops. In fact, in the end, when people signed off on the Nicene Creed, there's 3 people that didn't sign it. Arius and 2 bishops that liked him. That's it. That's it. Out of well over 300 people, those are the only 3 that didn't sign it.
Probably liberals.
So it's not like it was a narrow vote.
Right.
And the canon pretty much had been evolving on its own at that time. And now Constantine, he did commission a printing of the canon, but they didn't authorize it. It was the canon that was already known. So they didn't decide which books were going to go into it or anything else. That is all misconstrued fodder by people who have got no idea about what history actually says. So he did commission, well, I say printings. Obviously, they didn't have a printing press back then, so it was a longer process. But
After he was exiled, didn't he still put up a fight, him and some of his followers,
ooh, you know your history.
to create conflict?
He did. Good job. Yes, he did. After he was dismissed, he did come back. Well, he tried, and
right.
he was actually from Alexandria. He was from Africa. That's where he was from.
Okay.
Actually, a lot of Orthodox Christians were. In fact, Christian Orthodoxy, a lot of it's actually founded within Africa. It's kind of funny.
Right.
If you look at the roots of Christianity, a lot of it's African. It's pretty cool. In fact, one of the first catechetical schools was opened by Mark in Alexandria.
Ethiopia?
in Alexandria.
And, okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he did try to cause another uproar, and actually, Constantine ended up on his deathbed being baptized under the Arians. So yeah, so as he went on in his life, he actually favored the Arians, even though the church didn't agree.
Okay.
It's
So,
interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty much whoever had the ear of Constantine had his attention.
Sure.
So and this is actually his mother is actually the one where a lot of this happened underneath. Constantine's father was a big military leader,
Okay.
and he did very well for himself. He was at a hotel one night, saw a hot girl. It was Helena. That was the mother of Constantine, and they ended up getting married, and that's where you get Constantine from.
Jeez, I really don't know my history.
He came out of that. Here's the trouble about that, though, is that later, as he got better and better in the military, he decided that he found a way to rise up. This is Constantine's father.
Okay.
So in order to rise up, he had to marry into royalty. So he actually had to divorce his wife. And she agreed to it because now her son could rise up with him. But later, when Constantine is now, emperor, who's living in his palace with him? His mother. And his mother is now a Christian. And that had the effect on Constantine.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it did.
Yeah. So, according to the story, because of hearing from his mother and stuff, all that good, because of that, going into one of the battles, he actually had Christ's initials put on everybody's shield. And if he won the war, then he would favor the Christians. And he won it. And so it just escalated from one point after another. So once again, it's very, very, very fascinating history once you start looking into who Constantine was and how Christianity slowly migrated from being this first little nothing, then to a persecuted something, and then and then eventually being accepted, and then later becoming state mandated religion, or well, I'm not gonna say it was a good thing, but
Right, because
Well,
he
the
didn't
Church of
he
Rome.
didn't legalize Christianity. It wasn't like a state.
not till later.
Right.
Yeah, not till later.
Under him, it just became tolerated.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but it's really interesting. That's also where they came up with the term homoousios, and homoousios is of the same kind. Because before
What's the
that,
origin of that word?
it's Greek.
Greek. Okay.
Of same kind, because what they're trying to do is create a creed that totally said Arius is wrong. And so to do that, they had to use words that showed that Jesus was of the same kind as the Father and not created by the Father. And so they incorporated specific language. So if you look at that in Greek, they incorporate specific language to say, hey, Jesus and God, yeah, same deal, same kind, same elevation. So they specifically put the terminology in the creed for that. So when you're reading through the creed in Greek, you'll see homoousios, of same kind.
Same kind. Okay.
Yeah. So pretty interesting.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, if you were Arius, there had to be a part of you that felt like this kind of makes me feel honored that they have to do all this just to counter what I think.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
agree. Yeah. Yeah. I feel it's a power trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm in the position to do this, and well, they might not go along with me, but I can still be a mover and a shaker.
Right.
whatever your reasons are. You know?
Yeah.
Kept throwing wrenches into their plans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Smart guy. Smart guy. In fact, when he came back later, he found a way to reinterpret the Nicene Creed to still show in his favor. So very, very smart
All
guy.
right, so now he must be
With a lot of
Pentecostal
followers
inside.
too, didn't he? Had a lot of followers
Oh,
when
yeah.
he came back.
Yeah, when he
the
went
last-
back to Alexandria, he
Yeah.
got a whole new group of followers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had a lot of pull. Very smart guy.
Yeah.
Very, very smart guy. So yeah, he was no dummy.
Yeah. I didn't think that at all.
But hey, your best, your best, evil people are. Right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they always are. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
What's the old phrase? The arch villain does not believe he is evil.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No,
Good point.
nobody is the villain of their own mind.
Right.
You are the hero.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what side you're on in your own mind, you're the hero.
Yeah, this is true.
That's a good point.
So, but that's it. That briefly gives us Arianism, and
Well-
Arianism touches on your Unitarian theologies. It opens up a lot.
Right. Right.
Like I said, there's elements of that. Well, the modern Arians would be Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay.
Okay.
But if you look at that and Docetism, and you can find that inside modern religions. If you
Well, I'll
start,
tell you a personal story happened to me when I was growing up. I was Pentecostal, and it was Sunday morning. We were definitely going to church, and we'd be there all day. But I spent the night over a buddy of mine's house from time to time. If he stayed over my house on a Saturday night, he'd go to church with us. So they were a different religion. They were Baptists. Because my parents were a little apprehensive about me going to church with them, and it was critiquing what they were doing. But and at that time, I really couldn't understand. Aren't we all under the same thing here? Church is a church is a church, But here you are, judgment is being passed, and I'm quite sure in their mind they didn't see it as that. But for the most part, isn't that what it is?
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And once again, that's why we have 40,000
Yeah, I was just gonna
denominations.
say, and, it's, and here we are today. It's multiplied.
Yeah, right.
Well,
All you gotta do is go down the block and you see 6 of them.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely
6
right.
storefront churches.
religion believes in math. You can quote me on that. But there was a really cool story that came out of this. So, anybody know who Saint Nicholas is?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Believe it or not, he was not, an obese guy wearing red. So, the real Saint Nicholas, he actually was there during the council. But dude was hardcore. Mind you, a lot of the people there had just come out of persecution. A lot of those guys. So they weren't these docile, feeble,
Oh right.
They
That's
were
what you're saying.
hardcore people who had just gone torture, persecution, seen their family members murdered. So they had come out of all this. These are the people that are at the council.
Yeah, they were angry.
Wow.
Well, they're resilient.
Yeah.
And St. Nicholas was there. And he's actually much cooler in his stories than the later fabrication of him. And so as Arius was down there speaking, giving his opinion, St. Nicholas gets up, walks down, stands right in front of him, and just pimp slaps him across the face. Right in front of everybody. Just walks down and just backhands him.
That's showing the love of Jesus right there.
Oh yeah. So I mean, he was.
He did do it in the name of Jesus.
Oh, he did.
yeah.
He
Sure,
did.
sure.
It was the backhand of God.
Trying to anoint him, that's all.
Yeah, trying to heal him.
Well, Benny Hinn couldn't be there, so. So there are some cool stories that came out of that, But if you
Wow.
look at modern day, we still have these people. We
Right.
still have like people like the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
Mind you, I'm not saying they're bad people.
I understand.
All the Jehovah's Witnesses I know are actually very good people, good
They're very
hearts.
sincere.
They're very sincere. They try hard. I am not saying they're bad people.
They're just sincerely wrong.
They mean well.
They do.
They're very well intentioned.
Yes.
I have no issues with them on a personal level. But if you do not define yourself by the councils, you cannot call yourself Christian. Because the councils define what Christian is. And that's where my problem lies, is that people want to walk off and create their own personal interpretation.
Right.
Once you do create your own personal interpretation, now you've created a whole new denomination or a whole new sect or a whole new... If you do not define yourself by the councils,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much everybody can agree on the first four councils, regardless of what part of the world you're in. The first four councils can be agreed on by whether you're Protestant, whether you're Catholic, whether you're Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, etc., etc., etc. The first four councils cover everybody. So, from that point forward, they get a little different, but right there, you're good. So, any thoughts on that?
So believing in Christ, let's say you found a Bible on an island you were stranded on,
Okay.
and you read the Bible and you came to Christ. Is it you're still not Christian because you formed your own relationship with God, or are you Christian because the councils influenced the ultimate book?
See, that's a great premise. Now, obviously, if you are a believer in Christ, then yes, you're Christian. Okay, I think we can all agree on that. But as anything in life, as a martial artist, okay, I know that once I start on the path of martial arts, I can call myself a martial artist. Does that mean that I'm proficient in martial arts? Does that mean I'm even good at martial arts? I think by anybody, anybody who's done martial arts would say, well, no. I mean, when you start, you suck. So,
If that's a direct question, you've wiped me up a few times.
I wouldn't go. Yeah, Kelvin, you're much better than you realize.
Yeah, but also as a martial artist, there are certain things that you need to master to develop yourself as a martial artist.
Yes.
So they're like belt levels, certain things that you need to accomplish in order to become an expert in that field.
Yeah, exactly. So you start your path by professing that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. That's it. You've now entered Christianity. Does that mean that I'm a full-fledged Christian on my walk now? No. I mean, you've got so much to learn, it's ridiculous. Why is Jesus Christ Jesus Christ? Why is he called Jesus Christ? Where does that come from? Why is it important? Where is this prophesied in the Old Testament? Why is that important? Why is any of that important? Why do I have to follow any of this except knowing that Jesus Christ is Jesus Christ? Well, once again, if I relate to a martial artist, because there's a lot to learn on the way, because otherwise you won't know what you're doing.
That's an excellent point. Comparing it to martial arts, that was an excellent analogy, because you're always a work in progress. So same thing. With once you accept it, then yes, you are a consistent work in progress. So consistently, you're going through the journey, trudging. Be it martial arts, be it Christianity, be it whatever you're doing. So you must continue your mission, and it never stops.
Yeah. Thank you.
So if I may play devil's advocate here,
Please.
bad pun. So going on the whole martial artist theme, I guess the outside person who isn't a believer or doesn't want to believe would say, well, how far do you take you as an American here, your martial artist skills? Unless you're living in a temple on a mountain Or, how far does that go? How far do you say you're only a true martial artist, like these Buddhist monks or whatever would only accept you until you look like them? Or will you be accepted among your peers here who have a different kind of view of martial artists here? Versus like, look at the church fathers who are in um, who are in the Middle East today.
Right.
I think they view most Christians over here as like, you get. I don't think you're really Christians. You're not living the life that we live every day.
Right.
And I'm sure we have some of those same feelings. Like, I think we tend to have the feeling of like Christianity was born here in America.
I would agree. I agree with that statement.
We kind of have our own feel for it. But, how far do we do that? Is there a balance there? How do we
Well, we're
how do we find that balance and say that? Because we obviously can't be that. We can't be Chuck Norris. Let's just get that on the table.
There's only one Chuck Norris.
There's only one Chuck.
Well, that's actually a fantastic question, and I think I have a partial answer just because I want everybody else to talk. But I do know legendary like really good martial artists. Doesn't mean that I'm on their level, but I know very, very good martial artists, and they don't look down upon anybody who's trying.
Mm.
And as long as you are trying, they'll tell you if you get to train 10 minutes today, and that's all you could do, guess what? That's all you could do. Good job for trying. Good job for practicing. The key isn't trying to be as good as somebody else. The key is trying to be as good as you can be. So it has nothing to do with trying to compare myself to somebody who's able to live an entire lifestyle. It's doing everything I can within my life to emulate that.
It's a good response.
Excellent point. Excellent point. I was going to say that I think it boils down to your spirit, but the way you put it, the best you can be with what you have and where you are and how consistent you are,
Right.
So that's your path. Then this is what I go. This is where I follow. Yeah. And if you can do that the best you can with what you have, and I express it the best way that you know how, that's all anybody can ask.
Yeah, I agree.
But even the scriptures say that we are to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And how we do that is different with everybody. So here in America, we're in a much different situation in, say, the Middle East. And here we Christianity is very open and accepted. Well, it's becoming not to some degree, but not to the degree that it is in other areas of the world.
Right.
So that doesn't make us a better Christian than them or them a better Christian than us. But it's kind of really neat. I have a real close friend of mine who lives in Pakistan, who's a native Pakistani, and his faith is just absolutely just tremendous, and he's in the persecuted church. Where he lives, there's 2 Christians, him and his wife. That's it.
Wow.
He's got Al Qaeda there and every thing. And if he just says Jesus, his head's off.
Yeah. Wow.
That's
awesome.
He
awesome,
loves
it's awesome.
God like in a much different way than I. And it's very interesting. But he doesn't like hold that like, oh, you got it so easy here, but he doesn't treat that. But he treats me as I'm a brother of his. We're brothers, and when it's just you just feel this connection with him. It's like, wow, we're in this together. So like I'm praying for him constantly, because I know what he faces. And the neat thing about it is it was actually when they were looking for bin Laden. And I told him, they were offering this big bounty on him. I said, if you ever saw him, I said, would you turn him in? He said, absolutely not. He said, I'd lead him to Christ.
I was gonna say you just have to come to Washington to get him. He's probably at the Pentagon or something. Sorry, that's the beer.
But I mean,
that's the beer.
But that was his attitude.
Right.
Which to me, it would be like, I'd put a bullet through that dude's, head,
Right.
right? It's because that's how I'm, and he has no remorse to them.
Right.
And his ministry is to reach out to them. His ministry is to reach out to the clerics. So if I convert them, man, I got the whole town.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Once again, true Christian love. What did Christ say? To love your enemy.
Yeah.
Take care of your enemy.
Pray
Bless
for
them.
your enemies.
Pray for them. So, yeah. And that's
That's a great point, Steve.
It's easy to say. It's easy to say, but like your friend, how many of us could live in those situations and, say, you know what? God bless the guys who want to cut my head off. I mean, how many of us could say that?
Right. I mean, here our attitude is quite the opposite. Our attitude is like, kill them.
Yeah.
and that's just I'm just amazed by that. And
Well, so are you saying that we can't go just drop bombs on them and call it a rapture?
well, if you want to call it that, but no,
We're getting taboo.
it's just it's neat talking to other people in the world and how they see their Christianity, and they don't, but the neat thing is they don't hold me against because I'm American.
Right.
They understand. I think we have it too easy here, personally, but
So easy.
we do, and we have our small persecutions that we deal with, but
Yeah, that's right.
Extremely minor.
We're gonna take your show off the air.
right.
I remember some years back when my sons, one of me, he kind of upset me, some of the things he were doing. So I said, you can do some volunteer down at the homeless shelter, men's homeless shelter. So then I found out that because he was under 18, adult had to be there. So therefore I had to go with him. So then I took the other boys also. Point being, you compare your circumstances to other people here. Pointed out some people I did know down there are from back in the day. But also the point of we're down there, and this became somewhat of a regular thing, like a weekly thing. Usually Saturdays or Sundays, majority of Sundays, because that was the best time feasibly everybody could get together. And we start out early in the morning, and church was down there. Several times you would see different churches helping out. And I just didn't like the idea of this is just my view. I didn't like the idea of you coming in and you're very adamant to take pictures with everybody. And I felt that, how do you know these people want you to take pictures with them?
Right.
To me, that's totally irrelevant for your point of being here. If you're giving and you're sincere in your actions, you shouldn't have to even worry about telling anybody unless there's a point to be made.
I agree. Well, maybe he was just trying to bring some light to it. It may not have been anything about himself trying to be great.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Kelvin. That's actually scriptural. When Christ pointed out the the Pharisee who prayed on the corner so loud so that everyone could hear
Exactly.
him, versus the other one who wasn't that flamboyant. And
Right.
It's very scriptural. That's
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely right.
that's actually where the publican and the Pharisee, the story you're talking about, the big prayers and everything else. God, thank you, I can do this and that. Thank you, I'm the Superman of my congregation.
right.
Thank God I'm not like him. Right.
Right.
And in the corner, he's just, please God have mercy on me, a sinner.
Yeah.
That's actually where you get the Jesus prayer from. It's
Yeah.
the publican's prayer. So, because don't pray like that guy, just pray like this guy.
Yeah.
You know, just that's it. Just do that. you know? You know, humble.
It's good stuff.
Exactly.
So to circle back around, so out of the Council of Nicaea, you get the Nicene Creed. And in the Nicene Creed, believe it or not, you can't see it if you're listening to this, but I actually have a chart up right now showing how every line of the Nicene Creed is based solidly in Scripture. And there's a breakdown of what they did and what scriptures they used to create the whole Nicene Creed. And I know there's some areas that are disputed. For example, let's say, well, how come it gets down to talking about the baptism and the remission of sins? What's that all about? Well, that is just a broad term that they put in there. They don't actually believe that all your sins are thrown out. The reason why that line is in there is because you're trying to live the Christian life and walk away from your sins. So it's not like, oh, if I get baptized, all my sins are thrown out. It actually has to do more about living your life and how you're walking away from those sins and trying not to participate in those sins. So, but if you go through and actually break it down, every line of the Nicene Creed is based solidly in Scripture to make sure you know what you believe. And that is why churches around the world to this day still say this every single Sunday.
If you go to the Orthodox Church, on every service, Nicene Creed is read by everybody.
And that's to reinforce that you know what you know what you know. So, and they do teach you about what it's supposed to mean, where everything comes from, what it's derived from. So that way when you go to say it later, you know what you're talking about. And to this day, when I talk to a lot of, now I'm not talking about backslidden people here.
Why are you looking at me? Oh,
It was accidental, I swear. I'm going to talk about people who are no longer participating in church. But if you actually talk to people who are Orthodox or Catholic, they know what they believe. I actually was at work, and the warehouse guy and I were talking back and forth about religion and everything else. And the maintenance supervisor walks out, and we start talking. And man, that guy knows his faith. He really does. He was able to cite different areas of his faith, how they occurred, where they happened in history. And he's not anything in his church. He's not an elder. He's nothing. But because of what's reinforced, he knows why they believe it, where they believed it, how they believed it, just because of the way he's taught. He's taught to know what he believes. Same thing with the Orthodox people I know. I talked to my friend last week. They know what they know because they're taught what they know, how it happened, when it occurred. That's not a bad thing. People say, well, it's indoctrination. Well, would you say about science? Would you say that because you explain the scientific method to me, that now you're indoctrinating me? Or are you explaining things to me? Are you telling me how things happen, how things occur? If I'm in a history class and you tell me about the Civil War, are you indoctrinating me? Or are you teaching me history? So,
Very good point.
It comes down to, is it indoctrination, or are you just simply explaining how things are derived? And that's just two examples of people who know what they believe because they were taught the right way of what they believe and how they believe it.
now can you be indoctrinated with bad theology though?
Absolutely. Look at Arius.
Okay.
Oh, wait, hold on. There's also you and I. Oh, never mind.
I was going to say, I always felt indoctrination was pushing your view.
Right.
You can have the information, but you put a personal twist to it. So then it doesn't fall in the middle. It falls on a one side or the other. It's kind of biased toward the person that's presenting it.
I would agree with that. I would say indoctrination is teaching somebody something and repudiating everything else.
Yeah.
I
Very
mean,
good,
yeah.
Very good point. Yeah.
So, whereas if you know what you believe, why is there any reason to fight about it? It's okay.
Exactly.
I have Muslim students where I teach martial arts, and we spend hours and hours talking back and forth about each other's faith, why we believe what we believe. You know, it's fascinating stuff that gets brought up. Some things are very, very similar, and some things are different, but you'd be surprised at just how down to earth a lot of that is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
We're actually going to do a future episode where we actually bring in one of my Muslim students so he can actually explain why they believe what they believe. So that'll be in a future episode. But yeah, I already told him about it, and he's all down for it. So that'll be a future episode that we go into, and I'm sure there'll be just as much controversy.
No.
That's it. You're going to get excommunicated.
Well, I mean, indoctrination has a negative stigma to it, but not necessarily
it's true.
is it bad. I mean, to me, I would say, I mean, you listen to the word, it's doctrine, so it's based on something, and I think you can indoctrinate someone into Christianity because they're becoming part of something. So you are teaching them Christianity. In the process, you're indoctrinating them. So I don't think we should be afraid to be labeled. You know, if someone says, "Oh, you're letting him indoctrinate you," well, yeah, because it's true. He's showing me the history. He's teaching me, and I happen to be becoming part of Christianity. You know, I'm labeling myself a Christian. So I think becoming part of a group is indoctrination, in my opinion. I can't base that on a dictionary definition or not. But
No, that's a good point. You're right. It
That's
has
good.
taken on a negative connotation these days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfairly. Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that, it once again, it makes sense. It actually makes a lot of sense. Once
I've
again,
indoctrinated you.
oh man. Yeah. Once again, if I'm going to be a scientist, you have to explain the processes to me, right? The histories, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you for the indoctrination. Join us for the rest of the conversation in part 2.